Hey everybody, welcome back. I'm Emily Moyer. This is Strange Mosaic and a little different of an episode for you guys today with all the weird stuff that I normally talk about. I don't often wander into the sort of known categories of the paranormal type of phenomena that often, but we're going to do that today, and I'm excited to do it with this person because our realities have been orbiting one another since I think the very first solo show that I ever did when I joined Randy on Off Planet Radio. And I would never have thought that the topic that would sort of become the point of the show would have been Bigfoot or Sasquatch, but that's what it is, and it actually all makes sense to me. So I'm delighted today to be joined by Ashlea Stinnett. Welcome, Ashlea. I'm looking forward to getting to know you in the tangible here.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm deeply honored to be here in this digital campfire with you today. As you stated, we have kind of been doing this circle around each other for many years. You've been on my radar, and it's kind of fun because you were on my radar, but it became very much a periphery because I went down this very specific path to where I'm at right now with this subject. So it wasn't until this past April that I came through Santa Fe to do a talk where I met Danny, and then like realized that you and Danny do all these things, and then that you and Michael do all these things. And I've been following Michael's work for quite some time, like kind of since the beginnings of the Susquehanna mysteries unfolding. And so I love how this circulation has come back and found us here today with the topics that we get to talk about, because now since April, I have been able to do a dive into your work, and I have been able to learn so much because of the phenomenal topics you have the cojones to bring up, you know? And so like I'm super appreciative for the work you have been doing all of these years, knowing that you've been out there, but also not knowing, but also going like, yeah, I know she's got it down, and then getting that confirmation by going through your work. So just thank you for being you and doing what you do, because it's making a difference.
Well, thank you. I mean, it's interesting, like where we sort of start on this path, right? And like what we think we're doing, and then we find out like what we're actually doing, right? And I think probably the most, I mean, on some way, I don't know why this is surprising to me, but on some level it still is. Like you go on this huge walkabout, and then you kind of end up right back in your own backyard and sort of digging into your family roots and the land upon which you came into this world, and like what was happening there then that becomes sort of the explanation for all of this strange that we sort of experience. And it's almost like the very first hunch you ever had when you knew something was odd it actually was correct, but you had to go through like all of these sort of iterations, or like not wrong rabbit holes, because like understanding the architecture of all the rabbit holes, you have to do that in order to know when you finally landed sort of like in the right one, but that the original hunch was correct. And so it's weird. Like I know that some people like probably feel like I'm backing off of the kind of claims that I used to make about what's going on and why. And I understand why people might feel that way, but I'm actually not doing that. What I'm actually doing that is saying that, like, yes, that's all true, but it's actually not the point. And so, like, in order for us to get to the point, like, I have to like develop some discipline about like not going into these like very sort of seductive like back rooms of the rabbit hole and whatnot. And And that has been, I think, like the challenge and the thing that has brought the most amount of like consequences for me in the real world, in terms of like the strange set of consequences that you sometimes get to. And I'm sure that the same has sort of been for you. I've been familiarizing myself a little bit with you know, at the time that I first became aware of you, I had no idea there was like a Sasquatch part of your reality. So I've been familiarizing myself with that situation for you, and also just getting to know you personally a little bit, just through various things that I've listened to. And something I was just listening before we started to a little bit of you talking to Michelle Gibson,
Yeah.
who is another person that I've been like, it is in my consciousness that I need to speak with this person, but her body of work is so massive that I don't feel like I want to invite her for a conversation without having done her the respect of spending a fair amount of time with her material. And I just haven't, because of some of the things that have been going on in my life, I haven't had that time, but it's in my consciousness that I know that I need to do that. But I found it really interesting that sort of your you have this, in some ways, I guess this is part of what propelled you into the space you are now, that your sort of a story about the Sasquatch helping you to get off of alcohol, right? Like I have kind of a weird similar story about how I stopped doing drugs. And it was a little prior to yours, but I also lacked the courage to tell the person who was helping me get off drugs that they were helping me get off drugs, right? Like there was such a shame involved with it. And so I just kind of had that sort of experience of listening to you share that right before we came in. And so I feel like there's many things in common besides the few things that we already knew about. So anyhow, I'm
Yeah.
looking forward. Where shall we start?
Oh, um, yeah, you know, it's really interesting. It's something too that it's been heavy on my mind, and it's been something I've brought up in a recent interview that I did, and something that is really important for all of us who are taking extra steps on our path to learn more about this reality. Not everyone does that, and it's okay that not everyone does that, right? We all have this free will in this reality, and and when we do take these extra steps to look at the very real supernatural foundation of this reality, we get told constantly that from the control systems in place and the powers that suck and all of those dirt bags, they keep us, they want to keep this naturalistic shell around our reality, to where there's nothing outside of the physical, there's nothing outside of what we tell you, and don't you dare try to question it, right? The reality of this situation we find ourselves is very supernatural. That's it. And there is not both. It is just supernatural. And the experiences that we've had that have shaped our collective folklore and mythology and oral traditions, and the real true history, right? Not the history books that were written and revised, but the true history of, or at least as close as we can get to the history of this place, and also the present day experience. It's nothing but supernatural, right? And those who want to tell us that it's just naturalistic are probably using more of the supernatural, negative, disgusting aspects that can be brought up in this place than anyone else, right? So discernment and balance in this journey for the individual who decides to put their big foot into the supernatural pond has to be developed. It has to be nurtured, and it has to be respected, because we can be led down so many paths, and they aren't necessarily for a true good growth or whatever, right? I mean, it's everywhere. We're all subject to to all different types of supernatural experiences in this world, to include supernatural beings, entities that fall on the entire spectrum of super negative to super positive. And it's almost like, you know, we're in such a dense place with our reality right now that there's almost we're just used to the negative stuff, the negative entities and the demonic energies and all of those things that are really permeated into this existence through the trauma, through the drug addiction, through the alcoholism, through all of these things that become very, very normalized in our society. It's brought us down to this area to where we're interacting with those levels on a daily basis. And yet that's not the only thing here, right? Like, and the Sasquatch have taught me that, like learning about the Sasquatch, really wrapping my head around that and moving into a direction of now, I had my first experience with them in 2013, and then I really started devoting myself to learning as much as I could about them. So 11 years, you know, it's a study, and it's an education, and it's a friendship and a teacher-student relationship that has been the biggest reminder that we might be in this super dense place, but there are the representatives and ambassadors of the Creator that are here too. And we're in this middle zone as children of God, as children of a Creator of all creation, in this realm that's ultimately an education place, right? For the soul to experience everything that we decide to move through and experience, and to learn and gain from that. I'm pretty certain, you know, I don't have like all the evidence or anything, but I'm pretty certain there's something else beyond this, right? This isn't the only reality. This isn't the only physical expression that I'll have. We're non-physical. So what are we doing here? If you found your tribe that's decided to step further and into deeper contemplation, then let's continue the conversation, and let's encourage each other in really good ways to do so with that love in our heart, with the courage to heal ourselves from that which afflicts us. You know, that fucking takes a lot of strength for us to face ourselves in the mirror and to work and heal that which has been traumatized in our lives. No one escapes trauma, you know, and it's not fame or money or anything. We're learning that, like, that doesn't bring you happiness at all, right? And everyone has a particular type of trauma that exist and that they go through here, and it's not necessarily a bad thing. You know, take that eagle vision view of it, and where do we learn the most? What teaches us the most? You know, it's definitely like, when I look in my life, like some of the biggest lessons I've had have come from like the really hardcore things that I've had to go through. So you know, what does this have to do with Sasquatch? Everything. Because along this healing path, they've been there, and they've opened up some very particular healings for me, and not just me, but everyone that I know who's going down this path to have a deeper relationship, friendship, teacher student situation with them. So I lived in the Southwest. I lived in Arizona for a good part of my life, and I felt a deep, strange urge to move up to the Pacific Northwest. I was very much in kind of a base reality when I was there, and I'm coming up to my late 20s, 28, 29. I'm thinking of life a little differently. I'm I'm contemplating the future in different ways. I'm thinking about my healing and what I can actually do. And it just starts to blossom. And and feel correct to move up here, sight unseen, right? And when I was in Arizona, I saw UFOs, you know, every now and again. And I worked at one point 54 miles out into the desert, and that was on graveyard shift. So like I had a lot of exposure to some pretty clear skies, big skies, and a lot of time to look at that. And I saw a lot of stuff, and I had some very particular experiences there, but I didn't put my focus on it. It wasn't my focus, you know, music, the music scene, the art scene, you know, the bar scene, all of that, that was my focus, right?
Mhm.
um and and then that switched, that something happened, you know, that switched once we moved up here, because it wasn't just every once in a while I would see them. Now my partner and I, we were living off of the Columbia River Gorge, and we were living up on a hill, and we had a really big backyard, and we had this massive view of the river, and we had this massive view of Washington, and we had this deck that it was a 2-story deck that we'd go out and sit and just enjoy. And then we started seeing a lot of stuff. Then there was a lot of UFO activity, and it was so much so that I had to now pay attention to it. And during this time, from this move up here from 2010, that was when the awakening process started happening for me, you know. It coincided with me having my first computer ever and access to the internet. And it coincided with some extra free time to explore. And so what happened was that like light switch got turned on, and I dove straight into all of this. I'm like, what am I seeing? What is this? Nah, 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 nah. You know, checking out all of the internet, finding out that this is a hot spot, that there is a history, that the indigenous people talk about this, that the UFOs are something that are very, very frequent. Okay, Sasquatch is frequent here too. Okay, all this stuff is happening. I end up in this search, finding a place that people would go to and camp to have UFO experiences. And I'm like, okay, well, this is interesting. This is not far from where we're at. We're having all this, you know, experience here at the home. This is kind of an evolutionary step. Let's go check this place out and see what's up there. And this place was near Mount Adams. And Mount Adams is a very special mountain, and there's a lot going on with it. And I did, you know, I did a really good like 5-year study of just looking at that mountain as often as I could, and I saw phenomenal things going on with it. So when we get up to this area that's near Mount Adams, and where people come to have these experiences, they find out that the caretakers of this land find out that we do catering. We have a food cart. We have a food business. That's what we moved up here to do. We quit our jobs in Phoenix, and we came up here and we opened up a food cart. And I wanted to follow this culinary passion. So when they found out that that was happening with us, well, it coincided with them wanting to switch up their caterer for the events that they would host. And so then I started doing the catering for this place, which gave me access to, again, like watching this mountain and really looking at it. And we catered for 3 different seasons. My full time up there again was about 5 years. And I witnessed and experienced and went through some just off the charts stuff on this paranormal spectrum. And so it was also in this area in 2013 where I had my first experience with the Sasquatch. So 2010 to 2013, I'm getting this super crazy download of waking up and having a lot of UFO activity. And then I have my first experience with the Sasquatch. And it's a call and response that's happening behind me when I'm outside of my vehicle on this land at like 3 o'clock in the morning. And because I had this education of this 3-year education prior to my first experience, I already knew that they were higher dimensional beings. I already knew that they were psychic. I already knew that they were people. We're not talking about animals. We're not talking about a relic hominid. We're not talking about a solo individual. We're talking about people. So I had already, I'm at that level when I have my first experience of a call and response behind me in the tree line. And the call and response is hoo-wah. So and there was multiple individuals on my left and right, hoo-wah, 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 back and forth. And I'm outside and I like look behind where I'm at and I look at them and I know that they're psychic. So I telepath and I say, peace be with you, much love. And I'm doing this and then I start laughing and I look up because I'm like, I can't believe I just did that. I can't believe I just telepathed to a Sasquatch. That's funny. And I look up and when I do, 2 white balls of light fly over and cross over exactly where I'm standing. And I'm looking at it and I'm like, okay, well, there's a connection. That's connected. Those weren't just 2 random events, you know, there's connection there. And that started me on this just full run into learning and putting myself into their homelands and in camping with other people who were at that level as well, where they knew I'm not gonna camp with someone who thinks that they're an animal that they're gonna hunt and kill. Sorry, right. You know, not gonna do that. But I did find other people who were at that level as well. They knew them as people. And that's what I've been devoting my life to since 2013 in this grander scale of how is this going to make me a better person? How do I integrate this information in a good way? How do I share it in a good way? And where is it providing positive impact, right? It's not an obsession. It's a teacher-student relationship, because a lot of people can get super obsessed with anything paranormal and occult and strange. Mm-hmm. And again, like we have to stay balanced when we're doing this and making sure that when we are within this study, like it is for our good. It's not taking us down the wrong paths. So this journey now for like me at that time, like looking for other people to camp with and to learn from and all of that. That's when I learned about Barb Shoop around like 2015, 2016. And she was up north of Mount Rainier. And she has a house and she has a cabin in this super small community of about 300 people or less. The town is a blip on the map. It's gorgeous. It's the cutest little town ever. But she's been living up there like her whole life, and then she starts having Sasquatch activity, and then she starts documenting it, and then she starts inviting her friends and other people who are curious to explore friendships with the Sasquatch, to go on these intentional campouts. And so this was great for me. You know, this was my favorite show. I made sure that I was, you know, when the notification came up on YouTube, that I was there and I was watching it. And it was such a great education because I knew that these people were having real experiences. They weren't lying. They weren't telling tall tales. They weren't stretching the truth. They were being just, you know, like you're writing down a report of the stuff that goes down and happens at these campouts. So in about 2000, it was like end of 2017, beginning of 2018, I found Barb on Facebook. We became friends. and then she put out a call for anyone who wanted to join the group, and that it required a 500-word essay to do so. Yeah.
Right.
I was
For some of us, that might have been the end of the and 500 words isn't very much, but right, okay. Yeah.
I was stoked. I'm a writer at heart, so yeah, it was a lot of fun for me, and so I sent it off, and it was accepted. They were like, yeah, that's, I talked about how I knew them as people, and that they were, psychic, and they're coming from these loving places, and they're not the monsters that the control systems want us to believe, right? So and you referenced this particular camp out, which was the first camp out that I did with Barb and her group in this incredibly special area of the country. And when I got there, Barb told me, she said, if you have any requests, if you have anything that you want to say to the Sasquatch people, you can do it. Just telepath to them. They'll hear. Mm-hmm. And then that's when I did have that small conversation that was just me in my head, that asked them to please help me heal that which I need to heal. And again, because I didn't have the courage to say, please help me heal my alcoholism.
Right. It's hard. It's like, right. Like there's this, especially for those of us who are metaphysically inclined, the idea, like two things. I think somewhere inside there's like this deep fear that you can't have the metaphysical or the psychic without this thing, because like somehow that was always part of it or whatever it is, right? Or like, even if you can have it, like whatever it is, like it's hard to get in that like mind space where you're able to like connect the dots without the thing that you, right? So there's that to overcome. And then also, like, if it's true that you can have telepathic connections with beings, you're not going to be able to hide it from them the way you think you can hide it from people, right? So like you're naked in front of, like, right, it's just very I completely understand sort of that, and also you're on some level at this point like reverent of the, right, you're fascinated with these beings, these people, right? And you're not even sure yet what they think about you, or if they're aware of you, or whatever it is. So like the introduction, and like being that, like, I'm this flawed character, right? Take me seriously. Like there's all kinds of layers of sort of stuff to sort of have to work through to be able to make the request. But like the level of intelligence and compassion that it takes for someone to go, okay, I know what you're talking about, and I recognize that at this moment you're not prepared to state plainly sort of what this is, and so I'm going to go through this experience with you, and then hopefully at some point you'll be comfortable to do that, and not force you to make yourself uncomfortable beforehand, is a level of wisdom that we still need to develop as humans. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally. I mean, you just hit on so many different things. And the number one thing is that, yeah, you guess what? The Sasquatch know everything about you. Mm-hmm. They know, like, and when you wrap your head around that, it's not that they just know your energetic field, or maybe they can read your thoughts in the moment. They know every single moment of your life, and potentially like who you were outside of this physical life. Mm-hmm. They know the entire history. And when one Sasquatch knows you, they all know you, because there is some sort of like fully connected collective consciousness that's happening between them. And so me as this flawed human who had so much fear, that I hit it with alcohol, because that's what it really comes down to. Like I was When you want to numb yourself from the world, it's because there's a bit of fear, right? That of everything, fear of healing, fear of looking at the past, looking deeper, and all of that stuff. And yeah, for them to see me, the flawed, naked human, asking for help, and then having that level of compassion to give me the opportunity to heal myself.
Right.
You know, they didn't fully 100% do it for me. And there was like an actual, like, I think like a step process of where I had an opportunity here and I didn't do it. I continued with my behavior, and then it got a little more serious.
Yeah.
But the way that they helped in that more serious way was with the same just highest level of parental love that one would give to a child who
Yeah.
is doing something self-destructive, right? So who are they, right? Who are the Sasquatch people? It seems as though they've been here longer than we have. It seems that there is a genetic connection. There's a lady named Dr. Melba Ketchum, and she's been doing a genome project for quite some years. And she's had people send her all sorts of physical evidence, hairs, and all the different things, and she's got it genetically tested. So Melba has found that there is a mitochondrial link. We have mitochondrial link between us and the Sasquatch, but that other set of genetics is unknown. Okay, so that's what that's what we've got going on. That's at least like all that we know. And certainly there are people who have been in habituating situations with clans and with different Sasquatch all over the place, and that information definitely could be known by some. There is an aspect of this, a reverence and a respect, to where most people won't talk about their experiences with the Sasquatch people openly, because of how the control system has created this negative view of them. It's created this fear. It's created, a mindset of wanting to find a body, and a disrespect of who they are, and all of that. And so, and also the unfortunately, like the way that our friends and family can treat us when we start talking about how we've put our Bigfoot in the paranormal and supernatural.
Right.
Because it could just go straight over their heads, and they can think that we're just the most weirdo, people, and what we're doing is just not real, right? So I forget where I was going with that.
No, you're good. No, I know. Totally. That was great. So, okay. So a couple of things. So like lots of what you're saying is sort of resonating around in different ways. So Sasquatch or Bigfoot, or like, I guess when we're little, they call it Bigfoot. And then as we start to research into it or explore it a little bit, we understand that there's like many names for similar phenomena that different groups have referred to them as over time. But this is one of those topics that, like, and this goes for like all of the sort of supernatural or paranormal things, like, while it's never been the focus of my attention, like that isn't because I don't think it's there, right? Like it's just my extra experiences generally to this point, for the most part, have just not included that, right? But I think some of that is because of the nature of the kind of person I am and what my background is. And so the invisible world shows itself to people. When you have expressed an interest and the desire to understand and the willingness to learn and to do the things that go along with it, it begins to show itself to you in a way that you can work with, right? Based on sort of how you're coming into the experience. And so I fully recognize that it's not that different to begin with than like, I'm 5'2", so I'm obviously going to be a gymnast and not a basketball player, right? It would be silly if like the only way you could know that athletic excellence existed was to be a basketball player, that, right? And so you know, when you're ready to step into the heightened awareness, like it's kind of there's an entry point for you, and like if we're talking about the same or similar things, it eventually all leads to sort of this singularity or the center point of like, what is this? What is generating this sort of, for lack of a better term, sort of phenomena, or this like multidimensional, omnidirectional, space-time, sound, light, reality thing, right? And so like, like I didn't ever have to discount it, because it's like, yes, obviously, if the things that feel extra to me are real, then these extra other things are real as well. And thank you. But I remember like I became, not knowing that he had a different background before. I had a year where, or maybe not a year, maybe it was like 3 months or 6 months or whatever, but it was when I was a tweaker. So my relationship with time was, right? I became very fascinated with the whole like Dave Politis missing 411 kind of thing. And then at a certain point, like I remember before I had any awareness, like informationally, I was like, why does this feel connected to like whatever my mind at that time believed Bigfoot or Sasquatch or whatever was? And then I started looking into that and found out that he had like a different background, and there's thoughts and all kinds of other things around that. But like my instinct, without him ever saying so, like was that there's something there. And then another person who I used to listen to back at this time, who like, you know, those people who like 99% of what they say doesn't resonate for you at all, but that 1% that resonates pretty hardcore. And there was like 2 or 3 things in this 1% that resonated hardcore, but one of them was this person showed a picture of a Sasquatch that they captured. They live up in the Pacific Northwest, like outside of their property, that looked much different than any other picture I had ever seen or video I'd shown. And like instantaneously, this whole feeling came over my body, and I knew that is what it is, and not all of the, it didn't require, I didn't listen to anything he said. I didn't like whatever it is. I was like I had never felt something like that regarding sort of that issue before, right? And so it was like, to me, at like that, to be honest, like that's, you know, when I was in my deep research days, that's like the extent of like what I really understood sort of about this phenomenon. Of course, like as I have proceeded down the research path that I have in relationship to the experiences that I have that are indicative of there being much more to what's going on here than we're led to believe. I have come to understand the level of advancement that these beings have attained, because I have seen other things that do that too. And I have had moments, like very short moments of my own experience being like, wait a second, like I'm not here. I'm here and there at the same time. Like it's momentary, it's brief. I would not in any way be able to like control the experience to show someone else something at that time or whatever it is. But I'm like I knew when that was happening that that's the same thing, without having like done a lot of research to tell me that that's what they do, right? And so I'm not like, so the other thing that was always intuitive to me was immediately that there is this connection between UFOs or the things in the sky, right? And when you just explained that experience you had with the call and response, like on the ground, and then the lights in the sky and whatever, like to me, this is, I think these phenomena all of them, whichever version it is people are experiencing, are some sort of expression of the sacred geometry of space, time, and sound. Like there's almost like a domain that is able to be set up that involves sending like a sound signal, and there's lights, and then there's this sort of energy and this knowingness of being that is the thing that is difficult for us to comprehend, because we think of experiences as being linear, right? Instead of being this overlapping of multiple domains that has a knowable geometry to it, right? And that geometry isn't like obtained with a ruler and a pencil, like the way that we learn in school, that it's like understanding how to like create resonance, right? And then like how to like where you can do that and what else will interact with you when you're doing that, like to sort of set up the experience. And that all made sense to me, but I sort of arrived at that not from studies of UFOs or Bigfoot. It was just like, oh, that's the same thing. Like I just instinctively understood. So I don't know if that which I said just sort of made a lot of sense to you. But
It does.
okay. Okay. All right. The story that always stuck with me most from the Dave Politis catalog, and I stopped following him like a long time ago, but the story that like for some reason just like got my attention in the weirdest way, but it involves a lot of weird things that I've gotten into but sandwiched into a different story, was the one about like the little boy that went missing and like went into a rock, and there was some weird thing in there pretending to be his grandmother and trying to convince him to poop on a sticky piece of paper. And then eventually he was found in the same place that they had looked for him before, and he had some marks on the back of his neck and whatever it is. And like this was like this story is still so clear, like where I was sitting listening to him tell this. Like, do you have any idea why that would be? And then we could proceed from there into, you know, wherever you want with this. But I also completely understood that there's like they're always in locations, like the interactions between humans and the Sasquatch people are almost always in places where there's lots of UFO sightings, and also like underground bases, whether they be like acknowledged or unacknowledged, are happening. They're like always in those places.
Yeah. Well, man, you hit up on so many different things. With the work that David Pilates has done and the collection of these stories, it's pretty important, right? It's pretty important to know that weird shit is happening and that people are finding some interesting fates in the supernatural and in these particular areas of the national forests. So I like to remind people that the Sasquatch are not the only ones in the forest, right?
Yeah.
They're not the only ones. They're like, and when you think about the enchanted forest, we've been given this like very particular way of looking at the forest through our childhood and through the fairy tales and all of that, like these stories and everything. The forest is enchanted, you know, and even if you look at like old maps, people weren't building cities in the forest. You know what I mean? Like nobody's ever built cities in the forest because there is a different level of frequency, energy, sound, all those things that you're talking about within this area, right? And I don't have the science behind it, but if it is, if this natural environment and a place that has, I don't even want to say like a lot of trees, but because you can have this type of stuff happen in the desert, you can have this kind of in any type of a natural environment, but to focus on the enchanted forest and trees, And that particular flavor of supernatural experience within there, I'm sure that it's like heightening certain things. It's creating a space to where you're moving through space and time a little differently. Something that Marcia K. Moore has spoken about in the Flash of Beauty films that I was able to, totally honored to be a part of. But she talks about in an experience that she had where she's walking through the forest and she has this epiphany. And the epiphany is, it's not that if the Sasquatch are these higher dimensional beings, it's not maybe necessarily that they are stepping down in frequency to meet us in this lower frequency, but for those moments, we have found ourselves risen above into a higher frequency, and then we see the footprint, and then we hear the walking, and then we have the experience. So what's funny about this with Marcia, when she had this epiphany and she's walking through the forest, she was like, I wish I had something to write this down with. She's an artist, she always brings a pad of paper with her, or a journal or something, but she didn't that time. She goes around a corner and there's a perfect red notebook, like journal, that's like hanging off of a stick, right? That's brand new. And those types of things are happening a lot, like these very strange out of space-time scenarios are occurring, and the Sasquatch aren't the only ones that are within this spectrum of different types of beings. And are there negative beings out there? Seems like it, for sure, like absolutely, like that's part of this reality. So I personally have never been in a situation, even though there was like a couple of times where if anyone else was in that situation, they would have fainted because of the phenomena that was happening, right? Just out of like, it's too much. Even with those that I have experienced, I've never felt fear towards them. Like I've never had a fear that they are going to hurt me in any sort of way, that there is any type of negative aspect to them, that there's trickery or any type of heyoka like energy, right? It's not there with the ones that I have dedicated my time to know, which would be this Greenwater clan, which would be a couple of other clans in different areas up here that I go to at least like once or twice a year, more, or maybe once every other year, if it's like on the other side of the state or whatever. So that also, there's a spectrum within them as well, right? Like I've learned from others that that there potentially is this aspect of like very, very highly psychic, high vibration, high compassion, high loving Sasquatch individuals, like the ones that I'm connecting with up here. And that they teach their children the psychic ways. You look at the list, like the Wikipedia list. I did this a few months ago. If you go to the Wikipedia list and go down the list of every known psychic ability for humans, I went down that list and I thought of a moment or an experience that I had where that was represented, right? Every single one of them, plus some. I sent out to my friends. I was like, anybody have anything else off this list that they've experienced? And I did get responses. So there are some who are in full compatibility in using these abilities. And then it seems like there are other Sasquatch people who are not relying on their psychic nature, and they are not teaching their children the psychic ways, and they are living a more physical existence and not a non-physical experience, right? And then there's the very real aspect of interbreeding that has happened between mostly indigenous people of North America and Sasquatch people.
Okay.
Okay, so that is known, and that's part of folklores, and that's part of even stories from the 1930s
So
up
they
here.
really are just like people. They do all the same things that we do. Some of us choose a more telepathically, psychically, extrasensory, perceptive type of reality. Others are really much more interested in just the tangible aspects of nature that are here for everyone. We have, some of us are more inclined to stay with our own, others of us mix with other people. So they're exhibiting all of the same sort of tendencies
Yeah,
that humans do.
yeah.
Okay, so a couple of questions are popping to mind sort of simultaneously. Are in the same locations, so like, is it that in specific locations there are more of these type, and in other locations there are more of a different type, or are multiple kinds in the same areas?
Great question. And I don't have like 100% this is the real deal answer. I just have
Okay.
my own speculation and thinking about this question because I've thought about it a lot. Because it seems like in certain areas of like Eastern United States, there seems to be more violent encounters, or and again, not just Sasquatch, but a lot of dogmen, right? Cynocephaly.
Yep.
That's very much apparent, very much real. That's very much a part of this reality too. I've had an experience, pretty sure I had an experience with a dogman as well up in the Olympic Peninsula. Um, but it seems like there might be more aggressive experiences on the East Coast. And that makes me wonder, is it because there has been more interbreeding? Is it because those Sasquatch in that area are more prone to the physical, non-psychic experience? Is it because you've got quite a few, like a larger percentage of hunters and potentially an aggressive nature coming from the human first and foremost in the experience, which creates an aggressive response,
Right.
right? We do not have any type of aggression in the ways in which we come together in our camps to do these intentional campouts. It's very loving, it's very compassionate. They show that they're just as excited for the campouts as we are.
Yeah, I
And
understand the kind of thing you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah. So does that mean that there are the higher psychic ones up here that are more prone to that? It's my speculation again, but maybe because that's all I've experienced up here, you know?
The reason I ask is just because like I'm very, very uh well aware at this point, even though I'm still only learning, but like how important what is in the ground is to the relationship of location with the people, whether it be people like us or people like them around on it, right? And so what minerals are in the ground, either by natural means or by unnatural things that have happened there that have placed them there. And then the beings, whether they be the people like you and I or people like them that are on there, that are on the land, did they grow up? Did they grow up there? Did they transplant to there? Were they eating food that was grown in that location? Are their ancestors buried there? Because all of the different elements and minerals and whatnot, they store information differently, and your ability to unlock or decode it is dependent upon the understanding that is in your decoder, which is your genetics and your blood and your DNA and whatnot. So everything is like this lock key kind of relationship, right? And each mineral and element has like a different sort of set of beings that are sort of part of that realm or dominated by that, right? And human beings have different trace elements in their blood, and that, in my opinion, is key to like what environments that they resonate with, because you can get into these like conductive, superconductive, semiconductive, not at all conductive, caustic, reactive kind of relationships with your environment that can then show themselves in personality characteristics or in interactions you have with others. So that was why I asked the question about that. I also, like, this is going to sound weird, but like, you saw while you were talking about Mount Adams and Mount Rainier that I showed pictures of them, and I focused specifically in on pictures where they were reflecting perfectly upside down in the water below. So I, from my own experiences, which are much more city based than yours are, there is something to the reflective reality that we're looking at there that seems to be part of the activity, right? Like for me here, it's having to do largely with like the architecture and other versions of Austin that are available at this location. But out in nature, it's interesting that some of these mountains that are really, really storied are the same distance from the body of water and therefore reserve the ability to reflect perfectly upside down. That some of these storied buildings are away from bodies of water in cities. And so there's a technology or a metaphysics of sort of the temporal and dimensional movement that isn't restricted to one kind of environment there, right? And also, like, I think I am pretty clear on different kinds of days allow for different kinds of activities. And you look in those reflective pictures, and sometimes it's like glass mirror, perfectly blue sky or whatever. And those are interesting. But then you also have the days where there's like a violet crown or like the purple and pink and orange in the sky, and the way that's reflected and the kind of weird things that happen on those days are a little different than on the perfectly clear days. And then you have some days where you can see the reflection, but it's like blurry. And that has a different kind of activity that's sort of involved with what's possible that day on a day like that. So to me, like, that is evidence in our face, whether we choose to accept it or not, of multiplicity, right? And if you have you seen this television show called Outer Range?
Mm-mm.
It's really good. It's on Prime, right? And it's about town in, I think it's in like Wyoming or Montana, maybe it's Wyoming or one of those, right? And it's an area where there were Native American people, and then sort of the white men came in and started, appropriating the land and the relationship and whatnot. But there's this piece of land that has a portal, and the people use the portal differently dependent on their relationship with the land, right? And like the natives don't have to go through the actual hole in the ground, right? They can just kind of vibrate to the other realities that are available there. Whereas the white men the native people can go through the hole, but they don't have to go through the hole. The white people seem to have to either go through the hole or take as a drug the mineral that is in the hole in order to be able to experience this kind of thing. And so again, this is all about like the relationship with the land, and is it part of you or are you just consuming it, kind of thing, or using it for a specific function. And that's out in the middle of like, I don't hear, it's not on the kind of land where you generally hear that there's sort of Sasquatch or anything like that. But it feels like a similar thing to me. Like the relationship with the land is really a science. These elements all have like ranges of possibilities that are sort of similar to frequency bands on the radio, right? And then there's like beings, whether they be us or them or lots of other things, that understand how to tune into the different sort of stations that radio like has reception for or whatnot. Does that resonate for you at all as to how like some of this may be working, and then the music that they're tuning into based on that could correlate with aggression level or you know, sort of what the dance is to that music. Does that make sense?
Fully.
Okay.
Yeah. It does seem, I've said this a lot, and it's just through this witnessing of it, but like, and learning like their relationship to this land, to the physical mother nature, to any of the areas that they're in, is so like in tune. They know just as they know every single aspect of who we are in our stories. I'm sure they can pick up and know everything about every single plant, every tree, every mineral, everything. And they are working in particular ways, specific ways, with the land that they're inhabiting, for sure. And they are on like every continent, right? Everywhere that people are, they are too. And there is a difference. There is a physical difference between the different kinds. You're going to find differences between the ones in South Africa or South America as compared to the ones in Russia, as compared to the ones in you know, Florida or the Appalachians or the Pacific Northwest. There does seem to be a higher concentration of at least the physical sightings of them in North America, in the Pacific Northwest, but they're everywhere. And when I ended up in Santa Fe in April, and we rolled into town, the lady I was doing this adventure with, we pulled into our friend's house 20 miles outside of the desert, or outside of Santa Fe in the desert. We pulled up at 11:30 at night, right? It's totally dark outside. I can't tell like what the landscape is. Everybody's sleeping. We put our stuff away real quick and quietly, and I go outside into the front, and now it's 12:15 in the morning, and then I have an orb of light. Mm-hmm. That is, I found out afterwards when I measured it on Google Map or Google Earth, it was 180 feet away. And I telepathed to it if it would allow me to film it. And I got like a little light show response that
right. I know the light show responses from the
yeah. So it's like, what in the world? 45 minutes in stepping foot on land that I've never stepped foot on before, and they're there to greet me. And the next day I go to that spot. We figure out where it's at, and it's this trinity of junipers, and they've grown in such a way that they've created a canopy that you can walk inside and stand up inside. And on the ground, I find this sitting on top of all of the needles, right? It's not part of the environment like all the other rocks, which are embedded in the ground, but this is sitting on top.
Right.
And this is a smoky quartz.
Yeah, it's a good one. Yeah.
A good one. And I'll go down this story real quick just because it shows you just how much they pay attention to detail and how much of the totality of you that they know. So the reason why I was there was because I went on this cross-country trip to Oklahoma to watch the eclipse, and to do so with all my Bigfoot and friends. And we stayed at our friend Arla's, and Arla is a phenomenal woman in her 70s who had her first encounter with the Sasquatch when she was 6 years old, and who has Sasquatch living on her land and has a lot of activity of all sorts. I saw fairies on her land when I was there, you know. And so this big group of people that we've all been friends on online and in this community, this is like the first time we've all been able to like get together in the physical and enjoy each other's company and get together for this event. One of the ladies, Ginger, she had brought a bunch of, I think, rose quartz or a yellow citrine type of quartz from her land in Georgia. she picked up a bunch and she brought them, and she's like, hey, if you feel connected to any of those, go ahead and take it. So I did. I was connected to this one. This is the rock that I picked. And
It looks a lot like the other one, but just smoky instead of citrine. The same amount,
isn't it?
percentage wise, the same amount. That's it. Yeah, totally. Yeah.
This is a trip, dude. So I had this in my pocket when I was outside looking at that orb, having a conversation with it, filming it. And the next day we, Rosemary and I go over to those trees and I find this one and I'm like, holy crap, like what? Wait a minute. These are the exact same size. They're the exact same shape. The
Right.
angles are exactly the same. The
Yeah.
darkness on this one has the same darkness on
Yeah.
this one.
Yeah.
And when you look closely, there's a face on this one. There's an eye and a
Yeah.
smiley
Yeah.
face. Okay. So this one was shaped in this shape.
Oh my God. I have to tell you the weirdest thing right now. I'm sorry. I have to tell you this. So oh, this is weird too. Okay. So I'm not going to say part of the story, but I'll say part of the story to you later. So I was at the Indian Wells tennis tournament in like outside of Palm Springs, like God, it was probably 2013 or 2014, right? And I was having a lot of weird experiences of a specific nature at that time. I was still on drugs, and I was there with my mom, who was an alcoholic. So it was like, great, my mom's an alcoholic, I'm a fucking tweaker, but we wanted to go to tennis or whatever. And I'm sitting in one of the stadiums, and like while the tennis match is going on, there's all of this chemtrail that's created right over this particular stadium. And like no one else seems to be noticing it. I showed my mom and she like, okay, yeah, like that's happening, but she doesn't care. So everyone else, I want to watch the tennis, but I'm watching this. They're completely clouding the place over, right? And when it's done with it all being white, there's one that's made in black that is a smiley face that is just like what you just like kind of showed me right there, right? And I'll tell you the other part of the story and why it's funny that is like that. But I have never had like it was looking at me and smiling, and it was aware that I was watching whatever was going on and whatnot. But the color of the black on the white chemtrails is exactly that. It's like almost that, right? It just brought that memory.
Wow.
Right? Yeah.
That's funny because I'll have, and this is something I definitely have Christian roots, right? Like I can look and see some pretty valid things within Christianity and see why like a lot of it has been turned into what it has, because probably there's a lot of truth residing in it, But anyways, I've always thought, because I'll see like interesting smiley faces everywhere, and it's I'm like, oh, Jesus is smiling at me, like that's funny that you had this smiley face in the sky. It's interesting. Like it seems like we're getting nods, from the creator. We're getting nods from the higher dimensionals. We're getting nods from the angelic realms and all these different beings. Like the encouragement is there, for us to do good in this world and to not get caught up in all of the fucking craziness, right? Like we get caught up, we get lost in it, and it can just like totally deviate us away from the magic and the beauty and the ways that we can just make this place phenomenal and awesome.
Quick question about the crystal. Do you think, and then there was one more thing I wanted to say about your story with the woman in the notebook in the forest.
Yeah.
So do you think that this is going to sound weird, but do you think the Sasquatch like make the crystals, or they just gift them to you from their frequency, like it's in their frequency and they put it there? Because obviously there's not smoky quartz in large amounts on that land there.
There is a lot. There actually is a lot of smoky quartz on that land. And that is a big question, because they have presented things to us and to me, gifts that are like just strictly out of space and time.
Right.
Like at one of the campouts out in Eastern Washington, there was a bouquet of flowers that was gifted from the Sasquatch to one of the campers, and it was wrapped up in a paper towel from the 1970s that was absolutely perfect, like you just pulled it off of the roll.
Mhm.
How in the heck does that
Right.
happen? I was gifted a knife that was in like totally perfect condition, and when I looked at like what that knife was, it was like a steak knife from the 70s and 80s.
Yeah.
So where is there a Bigfoot treasure chest somewhere deep in the mountains where they're just pulling out like all of these little treasures? Or is there some sort of bend of space time and they are popping back into 1972 and pulling a paper towel off of a camper's roll and then popping back into this reality so that they can do that? And so for you to go, oh my God, I haven't seen that since 1972. How in the world did they do that? You know, like everything that they do for us is an education process. Nothing is by circumstance. No connection is without value, learning, or education. Like that's what it's all about. And so where did this rock come from? How in the world did they just know where to go to find a rock that was absolutely perfect in every angle? This side is old and weathered. This is old and weathered. This is old and weathered. This was snapped. If you can see
Yeah.
that,
Yep.
right?
That
So they
broke off of
did.
something there. Okay. Gotcha. Yeah.
That was broken off. How in the world did they get one eye popped out and a smiley
Right.
face? Let me tell you how this goes deeper. When I was in Oklahoma and I received this rock, I was walking the land with Ginger, and Ginger was telling me about one of her most favorite experiences with the Sasquatch people, which was in Georgia, and she was with a mutual friend of ours, and his name is Sam. So they're on this trail in the middle of the night, and there is a mega big Sasquatch male who's on the trail in front of them, and he's standing there and he's just looking at them, and they're loving it. They're loving this interaction. They're being respectful and just standing there as well. And then he turns to leave. And he starts to walk away. And Sam says under his breath in a whisper, "Please don't go." And as soon as he does that, the Sasquatch turns around and faces him again, only this time there's a beam of white light coming out of one of his eyes. Why is there one eye shown on here, right?
So this is why I was asking you, do they make the crystals or, right? Because I wish I could, sometimes I like have a download and I say a really smooth thing and I can only say it once. And then if I try to recapture it, like the moment of whatever it is gone. But when my friend Christopher Gardner was here back in July, we were talking about crystals and he was holding a Herkimer crystal thing that actually wasn't a Herkimer, it was just quartz, but he was holding it and playing with it. We were talking about it. And like I went on some monologue about how like the crystal sort of captures like a realm at a particular moment. So like everything, the entirety of the history of the realm that is from, like whatever the moment is that is created, right? That it just like stores all of that. And some people can get into these relationships where they can resonate with these rocks, these minerals, these crystals, where I can touch it and it's like all of that sort of opens up. And what you just said about that, so like maybe there was something, there's a piece of, you know, like quartz or there's something in the nature, and then whatever energy that he's generating from himself or she, the Sasquatch, like at that moment almost like imprints, almost like a pareidolia or something like that, and creates the phenomenon maybe that we refer to as smoky quartz, right? Like they're able to impart their trace elements onto like the canvas of like the more simple, not as complex sort of rock, and almost like leave their sigil on it with the eye. Like if he's shooting it out, like whatever that energy is, just sort of cuts it, marks it, and sort of creates this line of smoky quartz that may be evidence of some trace mineral inside of him, right? That's where these two things came together. That was where like this individual met this realm, and that moment was mineralized and left there for you.
Isn't that a trip?
Yeah.
Like that could absolutely be the case. And so what do we know about the Sasquatch? And this is through, this is experience. This is firsthand witness experience. They can shapeshift. They can shapeshift their bodies into anything they want. So it's not just that they have the capability of turning into an orb or cloaking or doing whatever, but they can shape shift into a different physical body that looks just like you, that looks human, that looks
Okay, so here's the explanation of the grandma in the rock, maybe. Right, with the little boy, David's politis. There's something in the rock that was pretending to be my grandma. If that's some right, like that could be, if that was some kind of Sasquatch experience, that could be the shapeshift.
Well, and they're also not the only shapeshifters in the forest.
Okay.
So like
Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Got it.
like
Okay. Yeah.
that's and it's about the intention. Like I came back from a camp a few weeks ago, and it was my one time to get up into Greenwater this year. But it was one of the biggest campouts for me ever in this entire time of connection. I've been shown a lot of things. I've seen things that are off the charts on like the biggest, like, spectrum of the paranormal, from that very first experience with them and orbs flying over up until now. I just had my first physical sighting. Okay. I've had sightings of them in a light body form. I've had them physically on the other side of my tent. I've had them touch me. I've had all of these things happen, but I hadn't had a physical sighting. And on September 13th, I did. I had my first physical sighting. And the interaction that was happening with, I think at this point, after deeper contemplation, I think all the activity that I was having around my tent and everything was from him. And there were two big things that happened. There were three big things that happened on that trip for me, which was this playful interaction with, I think, him in the form of green Douglas fir cones that were getting picked. They don't fall naturally. A green cone, green pine cone, green Douglas fir cone, they're not going to fall. They haven't matured, right? But my tent and near me were getting chucked. And I now have a bag of over 50 of these green Douglas fir cones that were getting thrown at the tent in a playful way, not an aggressive way, but in a very playful way. Over like 2 days, over a 2-day period. And so this interaction was happening. I also got 2 hand swipes on the outside of my tent while I was inside. So I got to see that as well. And then there was also a mimic of me that happened. Okay. So let's go through all of these 3 events because it's off the charts. So I think this was either Tuesday or Wednesday, and we had just had lunch. The main camp is down in this valley on the other side of the Forest Service Road. I'm over in this little area all by myself. Okay. I'm I have no neighbors. There's no neighbors anywhere near me. And I go over to my tent after lunch, and it had rained quite a bit, and there was a lot of water on the outside of the tent. I wanted to go and fix my bed and clean up, and make it pretty inside my tent. So that's what I was there doing. I was inside the tent. I'm doing this stuff. I start hitting the walls to try to knock the water off on the outside. During this time, a camper named David was walking up the road, and he wanted to come over into that area because I had been having so many experiences over the last few days there. That was like a hot spot area. So he wanted to go up there and just sit with the energy and whatnot. So as he's walking up, he hears a young male voice say, "Boys," just like that. And he's looking around, and it's no one in our group, that voice didn't come from a human. And he's looking around, he's like, "That's interesting." And he calls out my name. At this point, I didn't hear him. I didn't know that he had just called my name. And I'm putting stuff away. I'm inside the tent. Out of nowhere, for no reason, I get the overwhelming urge to sing the chorus line from Deep Red Bells by Nico Case. Out of nowhere. So I'm in my tent and I do that. I just belt out this line for no reason that I can think of. And even afterwards, I was like, that's weird. Why did I just do that? So, but because I did that, David, who was walking up, he's like, "Oh shit, maybe I woke her up." Like all these, she's tapping on the walls like that. Now she just sang this weird line. Maybe she was sleeping. I don't want to mess with her, like, okay, I'm just going to walk away. So he walks in the totally opposite direction. Well, while I'm in there still, I hear a hand swipe on the back of the wall, on the back of the tent. And I'm like, what? I've had plenty of hand swipes on the tent. They've mostly been at night. Some have been during the day. They can be right next to my face, but this was pretty unique. So I look behind and I'm like, okay, you got my attention, nothing happens. And then I turn to the right side and I'm looking this way and I'm putting stuff away, and another hand swipe happens down the tent. And the light from the sun is at such an angle that I get a perfect view of the hand coming down. And I get this in my periphery at this point. So I'm like, holy smokes, who's out there? It's a little hand. It's smaller. It's like my size, a little larger, thicker, much thicker, wider, and just a little larger than my hand. And so I'm looking now, I'm looking at the back wall, and I say, I'm going to start recording. And I bring my phone up, and I'm having the phone like face me, and I'm holding it, and I'm staring now at the back. And now there's another hand swipe, and you can hear it on the film because I recorded it, and you can see my silly reaction to it, which is pretty awesome. But he also knew that it was safe for him to do so, right? Without like stepping over any boundaries of potentially like showcasing himself, right? So so that happens, and it says a lot to me. I didn't get to know what David was experiencing until afterwards, and we got to correlate these two stories. It's like, you heard this small or this young, male voice say this, "Boys." I'm inside the tent, and for no reason, I get the overwhelming urge to belt out this line that triggers you to do something else and to deviate from what you were about to do, which created the scenario where he could now show his hand swipes, right?
Yeah.
So on Thursday, the hand swipes happened on like Tuesday or Wednesday. And on Thursday evening, we were down in the valley and we were drumming and just enjoying the campfire. And it turns into about 10 o'clock at night. And Barb Shoop, she's like, "All right, I'm headed to bed." When she goes to bed, she goes over to the snack table and takes all the snacks and gets them off the table, loads up the little wagon and takes it over to her car, to her vehicle, which is parked in her camp area. And she does that every night, and she puts the food away so no critters get into it. So she does that. We tell her good night. It's about 10 o'clock. And when she gets over to her camp area, she goes around her tent, and then she looks up onto the main Forest Service road, and she sees me in my jacket, in my hat, in my jeans, or not jeans, but in my pants, in my hoodie, underneath my jacket, walking up the road with no light, but a cigarette in my hand. She can see the burning ember of the cigarette going like, going like
Right.
this as I swing my arms and I'm walking up the road. She thinks nothing of it. Oh, Ashley's just going to bed.
Right.
So the next day, Friday, that's September 13th, earlier in the day, maybe around 10, 11 o'clock in the morning, Barb and I are talking, and she's like, yeah, well, when I saw you go up there and go to bed after I did, and I said, wait, what are you talking about? She's like, well, I saw you walk up the road to your camp, and you were smoking, like right after I went to bed. And I said, Barb, I was still at the campfire for at least 30 to 40 more minutes. I didn't walk up that road. And when I did walk up that road, I didn't have a cigarette in my hand. I had a drum and this coffee cup and a water bottle and a thermos and 2 drumsticks in pockets and in my hands, carrying like this with my headlamp around my neck, pointing the light. So I was like, no, that was not me that walked up the road. So that type of mimic has happened in the camp before. Okay.
Thanks.
Like Barb, they have mimicked her on more than one occasion. They mimicked Cindy, another one of our campers, where there's a big group of people standing. Barb sees Cindy and Cindy smiles at her. And then, a little bit later, she's like, where's Cindy? And they're like, yeah, Cindy's not over here. She's down at camp,
Quick, do you think there's any possibility, just because this is what my mind is doing with it, that it isn't a mimic, that what it is that they hang out in locations where there are access to multiple dimensions, right? And so you're literally there's literally another reality that's just right there. And in that reality, you were going to bed, or Cindy was doing this. So in one sense, like it doesn't dismiss the squatchiness of it, because it's literally, that's why the Squatch come to these places, because they want to move between the realms, right? And so the other question I was going to ask you, is there like for a lot of my phenomena, right, I find that they happen in the areas surrounding power plants, nuclear power plants, water treatment facilities. Now, I'm a city person, so that looks different, but a lot of times there are some of these things going on out far in nature. Sometimes they intentionally put them far out to be outside of the eyes of everybody, or because they're using whatever is naturally in the ground there as part of whatever they're doing. Is there any correlation to any things like that in some of these locations where you have these experiences? And they could also even be natural. Like, I know that there are natural fission reactors in reality. Like, the oldest one is in Oklo Gabon, which also is where the Twisi tribe does their stuff with Iboga, and they have all of these interesting sort of time travel-y kind of experiences. Is there is it possible that it's not the Squatch shape shifting, but that you're experiencing the sort of portal dynamics that are the same thing that the Squatch make use of?
Yes.
Okay.
Absolutely. You are absolutely on the same train tracks of thought that I have been going down with all of this, and especially with this event. This was the first time that that's happened to me. I've heard about, this mimic, and I think that they're both true, right? I do know that the Sasquatch can shapeshift their bodies into anything, and that includes animals, humans, or, orbs of light, or anything else in between, tree stumps, whatever, right? They can do that. And so let me finish up the story, and then I'll go into what you're saying, because it all coalesces.
Okay.
So she sees that the next day on Friday, it's like, no, that wasn't me, oh, okay, well, we're gonna recreate that tonight when the light is low. and I'm going to get in this. Barb said she was going to get in the spot that she was at, and she wanted me on that road with a cigarette in my hand, dressed as how I was dressed, and to see if she could even see that, if that's what it was, right? So on Friday at dusk, right before dusk, me and Barb and a group of campers, we walk up the Forest Service road up the mountain, and we're drumming, and we're doing this drum song for the Sasquatch, and it's fucking dope, dude. Like, it sounded so amazing. It was so good. It was like reverberating throughout the canyons and throughout everywhere. It was awesome. And when we got back down the road, I went to go put my drum away where my campsite was. Barb and one of the other campers were standing in conversation, and I walk past them, and I'm like, well, they're in conversation, I don't want to interrupt. I'm going to keep walking down the road. So I walked down this Forest Service road another 50 feet or so, and now I'm in between this upper road turnoff that goes into this upper camp, and then the lower road that comes off of this Forest Service road that goes down into the valley where the main base camp is. And I'm in between those areas, and I'm just standing there. And I find myself very, very balanced and in the moment, and just like in a very peaceful place. I'm very aware, but also just like detached. And I think about this later, like through contemplating all the events. And I recognize that I was in this peaceful place at that moment. And as I'm standing there, it's now dusk to where it's darker. I still have perfect view without the need of a headlamp on the Forest Service road. Inside the trees, it's super dark. Like, it's dark as night inside the canopy of the trees in the forested areas. On the road, I have perfect vision. And I'm standing there, and I hear a snap, a pretty loud stick snap on the right hand side of the road. And I look over, and I'm like, that gut feeling Sasquatch related. And then I turn and I look down my left towards the base camp, and I'm watching in that area for maybe about 30 seconds. And then I bring my gaze back down the road. And when I do is when I see the individual, and he's in the middle of the road, and he's between 5 and 7 feet tall. He doesn't have a conical head. He has a round head like a human. And what I'm noticing as he's standing there and kind of like shuffling about, he keeps his arms to his side, and I'm noticing he's black. He's this black color from head to toe, and there's no deviation of color there. It's just black from head to toe. And I'm really like looking at this, and I'm like, I'm probably like turning my head back and forth like a little puppy, like staring at this and integrating what I'm seeing. And I'm thinking to myself, because what he doesn't just stand there, but he kind of has his head low, and he does this shuffle 360-degree walk in a circle, probably for me to have a complete view of him from all angles, right? And so that was very intentional. And then after he does this, he turns in this circle and then faces towards the left of the road from my perspective. And he takes a really large step off the embankment into the tree cover where it's pitch black. And as he's doing this, I'm recognizing, oh man, look how long his legs are. That was a shock to me. When his leg finally came out, I was like, whoa, that's a long leg. And then I was like, wait a minute, he doesn't have a headlamp. There's no way that a human could navigate that little embankment that's like super, steep, filled with bushes and blackberries and sticks and branches and all of that stuff. And he did it effortlessly. He just walked off and walked in. Mm-hmm. And so I'm standing there, I'm like, oh, fuck, I just had my first sighting. 11 years later, I'm having my first sighting. Mm-hmm. And then Barb and the campers start walking back down. And the reason I was standing there to begin with was because we were going to do the recreation of what happened the night before, right? So I'm stunned. I don't talk about the sighting that just happened. We go like straight into the recreation from the night before. So Barb goes down to her area and she's like, okay, just start walking. And I do. I'm like, okay. And I've got the same outfit on. I lit a cigarette and put it in my hand and I walk. And she's like, that's exactly what it looked like. And I'm like, oh, it was similar. She's like, no, that's exactly what it looked
Oh,
like.
so it could even have been temporal. She could have been seeing into the net. Yeah, yep. No, no. Okay.
That's what I went to. So, and part of this, like when I came home and I was like, was it a mimic or was it a time loop? Right?
Right.
What was it? Something like that? Because
So
in
we
the
have
first,
we have mimic, dimensional, or temporal. We have three options.
yeah.
Okay.
And so to add just a little bit of evidence, or at least like this also happened along with this event, because I'm thinking about it. It's like you have this non-physical, physical, higher frequency dimensional being who I've now seen in the physical, and then it's corresponding with me walking up there, right? Which would
Right.
correspond with potentially what she saw the night before. And also the first day and the second day of being at camp in and around this area, Barb and I both found non-functioning slugs that were above ground with no physical injuries to their bodies, but they were non-functioning and they were dead. And she loves slugs. She'll take them out of her garden and she puts them, you know, she has this very like, she knows slugs, you know, and she's like, I've never seen this before. So then, you know, when I'm back at home trying to piece all these puzzle pieces together, I'm like, okay, was it a time loop, temporal, something, you know,
Yep.
situation? And was there some sort of like potential radiation that came from this event that fucked up the slugs?
Right. So
And
this
it's
is
in my
all
video.
it's
Like, go to my video. You can see the slugs. You can see like the road that this happened on. You can see the pine, the Douglas cones, Douglas fir cones coming from the tree down at where we're at. That's coming from a Sasquatch. And it's probably all coming from this particular Sasquatch that gave me the sighting of him, that gave me that gift of seeing him. And when I was just talking to my buddy Tom, and I was telling him, I was like, he didn't have the conical skull. He was between 5 and 7 feet tall. I was like, I thought maybe, my gut feeling said he was maybe 13 years old. And Tom said, no, he's probably between 9 and 11. A
wow.
9 to 11-year-old Sasquatch boy
Right.
was 5 to 7 feet tall. And his body, his shoulders were big, but he wasn't filled out. He was like a swimmer,
Yeah.
only
Lanky. Yeah.
he was lean like a swimmer, only thicker. And the reason he didn't have the conical skull is because the conical skull grows as they are growing,
Right.
because they have these bands of muscles right here that connect to the jaw. He's still eating soft foods.
Right.
So this hasn't been developed, which means the conical skull hasn't been developed. And that's where the age range comes into.
That makes sense. So radiation is always a part of this, like, right? Then this is why I think a lot of these occurrences, right, happen in areas where there's energy things go, like where there's power plants, nuclear power plant. Like I think a lot of power plants that we're not being told are nuclear power plants actually are nuclear power plants. But either way, whether they're regular power plants or nuclear or whatever, they're emitting radiation, and that is creating this flux, this sort of flux kind of, and whether like that makes it more likely that these events will happen, or maybe it is even that these events happen there that are creating this flux energy field that make those ideal places for power plants and nuclear reactor, all this kind of stuff to be, right?
Yeah.
The have you seen that TV series, the German TV series Dark? Oh, like well, that's so good. It's so like it's not involving, you know, like aliens or Sasquatch or anything like that, but it's basically the crazy stuff that begins to happen in the town where a nuclear power plant is, and how it affects the relationship of time and space of each individual that is part of the story. and what happens when they sort of become aware of the metaphysics of how this works and they start trying to take control of the portal, basically. Right? It's really, really interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, and then I want to wrap up this segment and move on over into the supporters segment, where I'm gonna tell you about the rock that I think that I was left, and you tell me if this is how they do it. Okay, but
Awesome.
the question I want to ask you right now is, well, I guess it's a two-part question. So the woman who was in the forest with the notebook and whatever, and she was like, well, maybe it isn't that they come down to our density, it's maybe that momentarily we raise ours. Like, for me, that's how I see all of this stuff. Like, there's all the different everything is right here, just happening at different frequency bands, and whichever one you most closely resonate with at any given moment will be your predominant one, and then you'll be sort of getting poked through from, you know, the one above, the next one up or the next one down, like on some level. So like, that would be more my guess, is that something is different inside of you, and so now you're having a different experience rather than someone came down to see you, although that certainly, that could be the both, you know, it's like a both and. But my question was more, do you think that, and I don't think that they like one makes the other not true or whatnot. That is it more that they exist at different frequencies and they step into the one we're most commonly in at times? Or is it that they are here simultaneously in this same frequency band with us, but they have achieved the ability to cloak themselves, or the ability to sort of spread their particles out in a way that we don't, so they're not so dense, so they can kind of move through things, or they can sort of blend in the background? Do you think there's like is it an either or is it a both and?
I think it's a both.
Okay.
I do. It does seem like there are specific things that they know how to work with energy
Yeah.
in those ways. I've had a lot of interesting comments from the I had an extended interview from the film A Flash of Beauty Paranormal
Yeah.
Bigfoot
That's a good
that
interview.
came
Yeah.
out, and that's amazing, you know, like I've been able to, I'm reading all the comments, you know, I'm engaging in conversation with some really great people who are giving more information. So one of these comments that was left was talking about the Merkaba energy body,
Mhm.
right? And how in our past, like, we as humans knew how to, or at least some of us knew how to move in that particular way by, you know, changing our frequency, changing our whatever, and utilizing that as a form of travel and movement. And you know, the Sasquatch are doing this. They never lost that ability. They never at least the ones that are continuing to use it and to teach their children about how to manipulate their body in whatever ways that it happens for that to occur, for that transmutation to occur, and to turn back, right? Like, it's at will. It doesn't seem like they have to go through any ritual or have any type of external help to amplify this phenomena within themselves. And where are they living? They are in in just kind of like some basic survival type situations of like, why are they living where they're living close to water, they're living in the mountains, they're moving down to the coastlands during winter. So there is a physical aspect to why they are where they're at, in terms of that physical experience of eating and having shelter and you know, searching for the razor clams in wintertime out on the beaches. But what is happening with the creek that's right next to our campsite, and the flow of water,
Uh-huh.
and the quartz, and the high
Yep.
levels of copper that are within this
Copper.
area. Tons of copper, dude. There's tons of copper. And
Okay.
and that they are like, they know all of the properties of the quartz, they know, all the properties of everything, and they are utilizing those in some sort of fashion, it seems. I have no idea how, but they leave these quartz gifts. There's other people who have explained that they do know, like, the different ways that quartz can be utilized, and will work with certain kinds and won't touch other kinds, and will gift a certain type more so than they would any others, because now, like, what kind of transmissions are happening to the Sasquatch who gave me this and
Right.
this
That was
particular
just,
rock,
yes.
right?
Well, I was just almost like, so I pulled two things. I pulled this up because in examining a situation, totally different kind of scenario than what you were in, that I recently had, like I found my way to this, and this seems to make a certain degree of sense, right? And if you look at this, so this is like showing the different like physics of how the Merkaba can be used when dealing with time or space, so dimension or temporal, right? And the different like angles, and you had talked about the angle of the sun, and like there's all this kind of whatever it is, there's an energy body, and then there's like a metaphysics of how you use it that has to do with location and light angles and all of this kind of stuff. So I pulled this up because of the way you were talking about the Merkaba body, and like the vertical, there's like a vertical version that is dimensional, right? And then when it's horizontal, it's temporal. And then when it's tilted to the side, it's sort of a cross of those kinds of things. That was kind of interesting. You brought up the Merkaba body, so that was why I sort of went to this. But I was wondering, with what you were saying, if you were able, like, and maybe you've done this, or maybe you're going to do this, or whatever it is, like if you can reach the appropriate resonance when you're sort of in communication with this rock that has been left for you, like I wonder if you'll be able to see the moment, like how that came about. Like I feel like that is attainable, like under the right set of conditions, that you can use that as the key to unlock the door of the moment that brought that into reality.
Yeah, my partner and I had the opportunity to sit down with a crystal skull, like a real one,
Yeah.
one of the ones
You mean not a crystal the shape of a skull?
We got to sit with Shana Ra, and Michelle Nocerino, I think, is the caretaker, and her dad, Nick Nocerino, was the man who found it, like after been given a vision as to where to go dig in Mexico, and like at the turn of the century. Michelle is a friend of a friend here, and so they had a gathering, and we got to sit with the crystal skull. My partner had a really and it goes in with what you're saying, that there's information being held in the crystals. We know that the quartz crystal is in our phones, they're in our computers. However, the magical computers work, I don't get it, dude. Like I just don't get like how all of this amazing stuff is happening on the screen, and we're talking from thousands of miles away and everything, and then it just all comes back down to crystal. It comes
Crystal,
back down to
right?
quartz,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
In very tiny amounts, right? So when you're talking about a quartz crystal in the shape of the human skull, which is like one of the most perfected aspects of God's geometry, right?
Right.
And the type of information and the amount of information that it can hold, it wasn't surprising to me when my partner said, oh, I had a whole vision flash into my head of the history of the skull, and how
Yep.
the skull was used to store information and to pass it along, and that this information will be unlocked in the future. The information from this will be unlocked in the future with my deeper contemplation and learning about like all of that. But man, there's so much going on to this reality. There's so much, and it's beautiful, and it's a mystery, and it's strange, and it's filled with education around every single turn. You know, there's purpose.
There's a history to every fucking particle that is in this realm with us. Every particle has a story, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the interaction of, I mean, so absolutely. All right, let's do this. Let's wrap up this segment with you telling people like where they can find you, and then we're gonna move over to the supporter segment, and we're gonna like step a little bit into my realm and see if this makes any sense as to how the communication could go.
Awesome. Thank you again for this opportunity to connect with you and to all of your audience. It's an absolute honor, truly. And you can come and find me on YouTube under Crypto Cryptid 1487. That's like the at Crypto Cryptid 1487, all one word, all lowercase, and the numbers. That'll take you to my YouTube channel. I've been documenting over the last year and a few months, my campouts and the different adventures that I've been going on. And you can find that new video that unfortunately I named before I learned that they were Douglas fir cones, but it's called the Sasquatch and the pine cones, because I thought they were pine cones. But check that video out and check out all the other ones. In my playlist section is where I keep all of the interviews that I do with people. And that's a great playlist. We get into some deep contemplation. And that's also where you can go and find the link for Ashlea Beauty Paranormal Bigfoot, which I was one of a group of people who were featured in that the 2 films so far. There's a 3rd one that's in production right now, which is going to be the full indigenous perspective of the Sasquatch people, which is I can't wait for that. I'm really excited about that. So and then also the extended interview for the movie, it's in the playlist as well. So yeah, there's that. I'm also on KDP. I've been publishing, I've been designing and publishing journals and planners. I fully respect the written word. I fully respect that our stories are so much more important. Our personal stories and the things that we've experienced in this life are so important to pass along. So much more so than the created stories of culture and history books and the control system. It's important for us to document our stories. And did you get your keyboard?
No, it didn't. I didn't spill any. Amazingly enough.
Awesome.
Yeah, I caught it quick.
So yeah, if you go to Amazon and you type my name in, which you got to do, this is a trip, right? About the weirdness of reality. My name, Ashlea Stinnett, Ashlea Stinnett. You type that in, you got to put quotations around it in the Amazon search engine, because if you don't, it'll bring you to a guy named Ashlea Stinnett, who spells his name with a Y, who writes about Appalachian cryptids.
Oh, that's so cool.
Isn't that weird?
Right? That's so cool.
That's such a trip.
It's almost like some mirror world shit.
It
right?
is.
I love it. Yeah. All right. Oh, look.
What?
All right. Okay. So we're going to move over to the patrons section. This was a super long first segment. So enjoy that, everybody. Patreon.com/offplanetmedia, emilymoyer.locals.com, or rockfin.com/Emily Moyer. We will see you on the other side.